Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good morning.
There he is.
Yeah.
He's on. He's ready to go now.
Well, I had to get my other user, my other Phantom user, who's the Echo user, was still logged into my computer. So I want to make sure we didn't have another Echo for you.
Me too. We're done with the Echo.
Yeah.
I'm done with that.
Definitely.
So we have, I have been speaking with our guest kind of backstage while we were, waiting to come on. And if you're watching, I think you're going to just be wowed by the interview with this lady this morning. She has so much to teach us if we will but learn. Lori Tuggle is, she's a citizen of Oklahoma. And she went to Belarus to do mission work. And if you don't know about Belarus is I think it's the really kind of the last bastion of what we call communism, or what we consider communism. And it's a beautiful place, but good night. The man who runs the country is a dictator. And she was there for several years, and she's got one of the most compelling stories. Yeah. So I'm not even going to just bumble around here. I'm going to bring on Lori Tuggle this morning. Good morning, Lori. How are you?
Good morning, Jenny. I'm good. How are you?
I am wonderful. And as I was saying, before we came on and you and I were talking, tell us a little bit about how did you get to Belarus and what did you do in Belarus, just to kind of get started on.
Well, how I got there is an incredible story and probably longer than you need. I went to church one day minding my own business when a missionary from Belarus came there and said that they need someone to go back with them to Belarus to write back to the U.S. what God was doing over there, because under communism, you don't tell stories, you give reports, and Americans prefer stories. So I went over and was doing that, and got to see all kinds of people and almost the entire country of Belarus while I was there.
And well, it's not super big, right?
Oh, actually, it's as big as Kansas.
Oh, is it? Wow.
Yes.
It's huge then. Huge.
Well, yeah, huge. There's about 10 million people, or there were when I was there, but they're like everyone, their population is decreasing.
So you were there to write reports?
No, I was there to tell stories.
I'm sorry, to tell stories.
Oh, yeah, there's a big difference.
Yes.
So I was telling what God was doing over there, and in the process, getting to know the people and speaking in the colleges and universities, and I think even one high school. And just in Belarus, it's hard to get a hold of a native English speaker, but all of the kids in Belarus are required to learn English because it's the world's business language. So everybody wanted an English speaker to come and speak with their students and help them perfect their English. So that's pretty much what I did. And I also taught at they call it a social center. It was more of an after school program for kids whose parents were working. They would come to the social center, and I would work with them for a few hours on their English every Tuesday and Thursday while I was over there. And that's what I did to maintain my humanitarian aid passport, my visa.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Wow. So I'm just curious, you said you spoke in places. Did they give you like parameters and say you can't talk about this, but you can talk about this? Or I'm just curious.
Well, this was the funny thing I ran across over there in a communist dictatorship, that they invited me to speak. They knew I was a Christian because they were listening in on my phone at home. And but the university would invite me to come and speak. The colleges would, because I was a native English speaker. So that gets you in anywhere, regardless of who you are. Wow. So I would go and they would tell me, you are not allowed to talk about God. But if anyone asks you any question, you are allowed to respond to the question. And God, being who he is, always brought me the questions. So I was always able to speak about God. And, the question I got the most often was, how is America able to stay free and be prosperous without a huge government? Without being controlled by the government. And I explained to them the founding of our country.
Yes.
And because we started out following God's laws and following the laws that man created, that we governed ourselves, so we didn't require a government to control us.
Wow. Well said, Lori.
That is all changing now.
Yeah.
And Lori, what years were you over there, and how long?
I was over there. I landed in Minsk on January 7th of 2004, and I left on May 12th or May 7th, I think, 2007.
Oh, yeah.
So a little over 3 years.
So I'm smiling because I already know the answer to the question. But man, I so want you to really talk about this. So you came back from Belarus, and what were your immediate thoughts?
Well, I was surprised to see how communist America had become. When I first went to Belarus, I was told to expect to experience culture shock because I would be going to a communist dictatorship and I had never lived in one before. And so when I got to Belarus, I didn't have any shock at all because I knew what I expected to see was communism. And that's what I saw. It didn't shock me. But when I came back, I was thrown completely with culture shock because I had not realized how communist America had become.
Well, this is where I want to jump in because your perspective is so awesome. You mentioned the frog in the boiling pot syndrome.
Yes, we are. When I left here, America, in my mind, was this bastion of freedom on the globe, and that we were the place everyone wanted to be because we were free. But when I came back, I realized that America had not been free for a long time. When I left, the boiling pot with all of us American frogs in it was just beginning to warm up. And there were a few people who were talking about our lack of freedom here, but not very many and not very loud. And when I came back from Belarus, I realized that we are at a boil here. We are boiling and nobody seems to notice. But now it's 2023. Many more people have noticed. A lot more people are talking and more loudly. But the people that the great majority of Americans still do not understand what is happening. They are still thinking in their perception of America as this wonderful land that where freedom rings, and they don't realize that they've lost the great majority of the freedom that America had. It's very sad, but just to keep on a hopeful note, there is a way that Marxism loses its control of people, and that's by all of us not participating. If we will, I believe it was Solzhenitsyn said, do not live, I can't even remember the exact words, but do not live by a lie.
Yes.
So if we all hold on to the truth, live by the truth, speak the truth, regardless of the consequences, they cannot have this country. But because so many still are under the spell of this ideal of freedom in the US, which no longer really exists, then it's going to take all of us who know to stand firm and be loud and hopefully win back some of these people who have been so brainwashed is the only word I can think of.
So let me ask you this, because here's what's going to happen. We're going to publish this video, and I'm going to cut clips out of it and, spread it around so people can see it. And the first thing that's going to happen, that's not true. We're free. I don't even know what she's talking about. So give me some examples. When you say you were not free and you were shocked when you came back, give me some specific examples about how what you found and why you believe that to be true.
Well, the first thing that popped into my head when you were saying that is that we have an income tax. If you have bought your house, paid in full, and you have to pay taxes on that house, it is still not yours. It belongs to the government, the one you're paying for it every year. You do not have a freedom of owning your own property. And that is one of our founding freedoms. So if you don't have that, and now with speech, the progressives, the Marxists, that's the new name for Marxism these days, is progressive. They are changing language, and the one who owns the language owns the people. They're changing our history. They're telling us lies about what actually happened in this country. So if they own our history, they own our language. We're told, a matter of fact, even on the internet, they can take down what you say if they don't like it. They're changing the biology. Men can become women. And you know what I noticed in Belarus is that men and women are interchangeable. They're not considered people. A population in a dictatorship, a communist dictatorship like Belarus, everyone, it's like nobody has a face. That's the way it is. And so with our masks, everybody is interchangeable. It doesn't matter who you are. You have no value other than the work you produce.
That's it. So let me jump in there. So we have, constantly, I think, since we started, objected to the term workforce. And our Governor Stitt, loves the term workforce, throws it out consistently. The educrats in our state love to say we're educating people for the workforce. It's workforce is a communist term, which describes exactly what you just talked about, people without a face, because we don't need to see who you are. We don't care what you are. We don't care whether you're a man. We don't care whether you're a woman. We don't care whether you're a dog, so long as you can actually work and do the work of the collective, right? Because everybody's in a collective. And so I'm going to bounce off of that back to you, because that's another thing we talked about too. So I'm going to bounce that back to you.
Well, I had a couple of friends in Belarus, a little older than me. The husband was in the Soviet Army, and the wife was a translator for the KGB. And the KGB is still called the KGB in Belarus. They love that. Alexander Lukashenko looks on the Soviet times as the good old days. So that's not a surprise. But what they were telling me about the Soviet days that they were living through, that on the collective farms, the people would be skin and bone while they were working the collective farms and shipping the food off to the cities where their elites lived. And so the elites in the cities were fat and happy and had everything that they needed, while the people working the collective farms to feed those elites were dying of starvation. But they were continually told through a radio system that every home in the Soviet Union had a radio in it. And they were required to listen to all of the government broadcasts, which told them that the only thing standing between them and Western tanks in their streets was the dictator. And that is still the case today. Alexander Lukashenko does the same thing, not only on radio, but on the television nowadays. And so it reminded me of George Orwell's little monitors in the houses where you couldn't get away, and you had to listen to the government broadcasts with their propaganda. So these people,
and like smart TVs, they could see you through the television.
Yeah.
People need to read 1984. I mean, it's literally, I think, God gave Orwell that vision so that we could project, but nobody wants to read that. And then if they read that, they go, oh, well, that's not happening. You're going, and well, how is that not happening? What is Newspeak? Hello?
That's where I'm going. Ludmila, the lady I knew over there, who was the KGB translator, she said that the people on the collective farms dying of starvation, working themselves to death for the elites, fully believed the propaganda that they were very rich in Belarus, and the Western countries and the United States wanted their beautiful land, is what he calls it. And they would hear this on the radio every day, over and over and over, so that they believed these things. And so while they could look in a mirror and see themselves dying of starvation, they believed that they were the richest country in the world and everybody wanted their land. So this is cognitive dissonance. They could see with their eyes what was the truth, but they believed the lie they were told. So what they saw didn't line up with what they were hearing, but they believed what they heard rather than what they saw. And that's what we're seeing in the United States. All of these, matter of fact, I think it was James Lindsay who who has this book, New Discourses, that explains what's happening in this country right now. And he perfectly points out that we have this cognitive dissonance going on in this country right now, with all of the people seeing our freedoms being given away by the American people and not believing that this is a bad thing. They are completely brainwashed into believing what is going on here is right and appropriate. And James Lindsay was saying that this Marxist indoctrination started in our teaching colleges back in the early 1900s. And so it's gone, all of the teachers who have gone through these teaching colleges have been programmed with this ideology, and they're now teaching our kids this ideology. And that the millennial generation is the first generation to go through it from pre-K to university.
Correct.
So, but they're the ones that are now raising the children and educating them in this ideology. So our only hope now is to just, well, if we can get our kids out of these schools, get them out. The millennial parents are, I think, just gone. And so there's nothing we can do except speak the truth to them and hope they will understand and hear it. But there really isn't much we can do with the schools except get our kids out. So at this point, I don't know. I don't think there's anything else we can do but just stand firm in the truth, speak the truth, live the truth, and don't back down when anybody tries to shut us up. And that, I do believe, can make headway through this.
So it's interesting that you said this. Michael and I are going to have to do a specific podcast on this, but remember, our legislature passed a tax credit so that parents could apply for this tax credit, which would be up to $7,500 per child. And my argument at the very beginning was, tell me how many people are making so much money that you can give them back, which is what a tax credit is supposed to be, $7,500 per child. So I knew it was hinky from the very beginning. And unfortunately, my mom passed in February, so I wasn't able to really push back on what they were doing, this year at the Capitol. But they passed this tax credit. And so I've spent the last couple of days reading through the rules on this tax credit. When you said, and I think those of us who have studied communism at all certainly have read 1984 or anything else. And I've read Solzhenitsyn as well. I think if people would do these kinds of things, things would make more sense to them, but they don't want to do that because I can get pictures on this and I can find out my football scores on this. It's just too much trouble to really educate yourself. But here's what's interesting to me. Are you ready? For the tax year 2024, the total amount of credits shall not exceed $150,000.
Yeah, there's a cap.
But that's not even my point. So the bottom is $75,000. All right. So you can apply for this tax credit if you make from $75,000 to $150,000. That's the bottom one. Okay. So we were supposed to do this because kids were in need. So there are no kids that are in need below $75,000. Right. Okay. And so if you make $150,000, chances are you have at least one new car in your garage and possibly even a $200,000 home. So this is a way for elites to do something with their children, not for, the rest of us, So I think it's so important to look at what you said, because in a communist society, the rich get richer and then the rest of everybody else is starving. Yeah. And this is exactly what we're seeing happening in Oklahoma, like you just said. And it frustrates me too. I mean, do you notice this as well? I notice that you'll talk to people and they'll say two things about Oklahoma. We're in the Bible Belt and we're a red state. And I have in the past year come to vehemently disagree with both of those statements. Just out of curiosity, what are your thoughts?
Well, I moved to Oklahoma from Washington State, where a Christian's a Christian and a Wiccan's a Wiccan and a Satanist is a Satanist, and everybody knew everybody. So we understood who was who. Then I moved to Oklahoma, and talk about culture shock. Everybody I've met in Oklahoma says they're a Christian. You cannot tell by the way they're living. So my idea is that there's a lot of people who give lip service to being Christians who don't actually live what they say they believe. So I would not call, I find this more rust than the Bible Belt. I can't even go along with that in any way, because I've met more professing non-believer. They're professing Christians that are in reality non-believers than I have met actual Christians here. So I don't go along with that at all. But as far as the school system, and being a red state, I believe in Oklahoma there are more conservatives than there are Marxists. But I also see that there are enough Marxists in this state who are active and fighting for their cause than there are conservatives active and fighting for our cause. Even though we outnumber them exponentially, we are not fighting, but they are. Or I can't say not fighting. There are very few fighting. And so many conservatives seem to also be cowards, that it's not helpful to Oklahoma to have people who are conservative but are afraid to say anything because they might be called a name.
Yeah, well, I'll make a comment to all that and what you said also, Jenny, with kind of the boiling pot. And I want to give people just a little bit of credit, because I think that Lori has an exceptional point of view because she experienced that communism firsthand, that Marxism firsthand. Jenny, you have always been anti-Marxist. There's not very many of us that can truly, the other side, the left, the liberals, they are dedicated 100% to their cause.
Yes,
whatever it may be, they're awake. They know they have a plan. So there's no doubt about them. For the conservatives, I'll go back to Lori's point with the boiling pot and the water. Everyone is in that pot. They just don't realize how Marxist the left really is. Mm-hmm. And then just for the few of us, that are speaking out. I think, at this point in time, I actually do think we are winning. People are coming around faster and faster. I don't think this podcast, Jenny, could have really existed 5, 6, 10 years ago, true. Like the point is now.
Yeah.
And I think the only way we actually lose is if we let off the gas. If we don't keep going, keep talking about it, because Lori has just that exception of living in that state firsthand for 3 years. And Lori, this is just a question for you. How attuned were you to the whole Marxist influence here in the United States before you went over there? I know you said it was exponentially worse, when you got back, but maybe it's because you saw firsthand, when it's so blatantly out in the open, that's what it is. You saw as soon as you got back, you're like, oh my God, it's the exact same thing. I didn't even know. I didn't even realize it was that bad, until you just saw, hey, this is communism. This is Marxism. And then you get back here, maybe that's the case of really realizing, just how bad it was here.
Actually, you're right on, Michael. When I went to Belarus, as far as I knew, America was sunshine and lollipops. Yeah. But when I came back after living under a communist dictator, I realized that America had gone communist a long time ago, and I never noticed. It was a moment of shame for me when I came back and realized it. But it's probably the core of my frustration is that I didn't know this. And since I've come back in 2007, I've been trying to talk to people about this. When I came back, I went back to my old job, and they had gone from personnel when I left to a personnel department to human resources when I came back. And I went to my supervisor and said, we are heading into communism this way. Why do you only think we're resources? But now the Putnam City School District doesn't even have human resources anymore. They call their people human capital, something you make money off of.
Yeah.
So we are nothing to them but a means to their own income, to their own.
And here's the crazy thing, Lori, you know as well as I do, if you read anything, I've told people, as many times as I can think of, to read The Naked Communist, because he just totally, lays everything out for you in The Naked Communist. And if you read that, you get all of these communist terms like capital and workforce and, all of these kinds of things. And we are infusing those into our language and thinking that that's okay. And I remember when we first started fighting Common Core, which of course was, again, the biggest way you could get into public schools, right, was right under everybody's nose, was just making it a collective, even though it's already a collective. You know what I mean? Just making it a national collective, which was against the law. Not that we have laws anymore, but anyway, that's another topic. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, you're using these terms, workforce and workforce development and human capital. And how do you, and everybody thinks that's okay, and they don't get that once you define the word, the action is right behind, because you have to define, just like you said earlier, and you said virtually the same thing. Once you define the word, once you change the language, once you define the word, there comes the action right behind, because everybody is already like, oh, yeah, workforce. Okay, great. Isn't that great? We're going to train our kids to work. What?
Well, a dictator needs slaves. So we have to train our kids to work. When I was in Belarus, I learned how that's done. And it's totally acceptable to the population. Your kid is assigned, they get a choice of a limited number of careers they might want to try. They choose one, and I believe it's from the 6th grade for the rest of their education. They're trained specifically for that career. And actually, that's the same way they do it in Venezuela, or they did when the kids were being fed. But the only way that a communist dictator can stay in office is to keep the people subjugated. And in order to do that, you have to limit their education and make them, one of the things that just kills me about this that has come to the US is the idea of authorities, people who are supposed to know what they're talking about. And it was really blatant with Fauci. You are not allowed to trust what the government has dubbed an authority on whatever subject. And what I learned in Belarus, and is it okay if I tell a little story?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay, it's short.
You're here.
I met a doctor in Belarus. He's a cardiologist. He came to my flat, and in Belarus, there's no air conditioning because it's 2 states away from the oh my goodness, it fell out of my head. Anyway, it's too far north to need air conditioning. And so he came to my flat. I had all 3 of my windows to my flat open to get air. It was August. It was 90 degrees outside, and I had no air conditioner. So it was a Sunday afternoon, and we always had tea at my apartment for me and whoever wanted to be there. What we did at this tea was read through the Bible and discuss it. And the kids that came would ask questions, and we would find out what God said about their questions. And so this doctor came because he just wanted to practice his English. He didn't believe in God. but he wanted to speak in English with a group. So he came to the door. I opened it. He took one step inside and he said, "Do you have more than one window open?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "You'll have to close all of them except one, or I'll get a cold." This is a cardiologist in Belarus, in a socialist communist dictatorship. He had enough understanding to supposedly work on hearts, but he would not believe that he could know enough about the ear, nose, and throat doctor's job to say that he would not get a cold if he walked into a place that had an airflow going. So I closed two of the windows so he would come in, and we all sweated that whole time. But this cardiologist could not trust his own critical thinking to understand that having moving air will not cause you to get a cold. He could not do that.
Well, do you suppose it's because he makes the same thing as a garbage person?
Well, I think that he had been so indoctrinated into this ideology that limits people and what they're allowed to know or claim to know, that he would not push that boundary. So when Fauci pops up and says in February, no American should be wearing a mask, and then in March, everyone should be wearing 2 or 3. So since we were not supposed to question our authority, Dr. Fauci, the sheep followed and they put their masks on. And those of us who didn't were criticized and
ostracized. Let's make ostracized.
So that was just, it floored me. And as soon as they came out and after saying nobody should be wearing a mask, they came out and said everyone should be wearing a mask. I decided I was never going to wear a mask. So,
well, part of the reason why I made the comment about the cardiologist and the garbage man making the same thing is you and I were talking about that too.
Yes.
So
yeah, a cardiologist and a street sweeper, when I was there, would get $200 a month from the government for their allowance, is what I called it, because whatever they were making never matched what they were doing. But everything was distributed according to what the government decided it would be.
And
like
income tax credits.
Yeah. Well, if you're getting tax credits, you have to jump through the hoops the government dictates for those tax credits.
Well, but a tax credit is just a redistribution of wealth. I mean, if the government wanted us to have our own money, they would simply not tax us. But it's the only way you can control us is by convincing us that we need to have our money back, right? We're going to give you your money back. Oh, but I'm also going to give it to this company Canoe to make electric vehicles. I'm also going to give your money to do, I'm also going to give your neighbor who lives in a $350,000 house money to put their kids in a private school.
Yes.
It's all redistribution of wealth. It's just sick.
Well, considering that, was it your group that came out with the study that said that every school in Oklahoma was following this same plan except for 3? So even if you sent your kid to a private school, you're still getting the same indoctrination as a public school.
Well, and that's the point that we made during Common Core. Yeah, was, I mean, if you can't go, so long as the state is dictating anything, there's no freedom. I mean, you don't have an outside of that. And, it basically says in the rules for this tax credit, that you're going to have to proffer up all of your receipts and everything else to the government so that you can be granted this money. And people are going to go, oh, but it's my money. And you're like, then tell them not to take it from you.
Yeah.
See, that's how that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not give it back to me. It's my money. Nope. Don't take it from me. Make my own house my own house. If you really, really wanted this, Governor Stitt, my goodness, you would do away with property tax and let us all have the fruits of our labor, which is what the founders kind of wanted us to have.
Right.
So I'm so sick of the nonsense, and I'm so sick of the idea that, that we're being gifted our money back. Oh, you don't give me my money back. How are you gifting me my money back?
Yeah.
Then just don't take it from me in the first place. It's just obnoxious. But
and
what I want to ask you now is, before we do that, I wanted to make a point, if you will let me make a point really fast, because you said a minute ago that the millennials are the first group that have gone all the way through this system, right? From beginning to end. So I'm going to read you, it's going to take just a few minutes, but I'm going to read you something. This was a comment that was left by a woman who was arguing with me on one of our Facebook posts on our Facebook page. And this is about books, because, we've had these books that have been introduced into schools that are just developmentally inappropriate. And the argument is because the leftists always have to make the narrative an either or narrative, right? So you can't win. I mean, you have to force everything into a box, right? So their argument is, then you're book banning. If we want to just keep young kids from having their innocence destroyed by reading about homosexuality or anal sex or any of the other really gross things, there's rape and some of the other incest that we've been reading in some of these books that are in public school libraries, instead of just saying, you know what, let's let kids be kids and let's not do that. But they'll still be available in libraries on your tax dollars, and they'll still be, available through Amazon or whatever, just not in a public school, right?
Right.
Okay, but to them, that's book burning. If it's not everywhere, then you're burning all of the books. Well, I've read Fahrenheit 451. I suggest everybody read it. That's not where we are. So we were having an argument about this, and this is what she says. That's exactly what I'm saying. Removing books from libraries, period, is Nazi shit. There has never been a time in history where the groups advocating for forced removal of literature from libraries are the good guys. Look at history. Parents are responsible for what their kids can and can't check out. Removing books entirely is not the answer. I don't need some fascist group. Now, see, she's name calling, right? So now we're fascists because we don't want books. We don't want a 5-year-old reading about anal penetration. Okay. I don't need some fascist group to decide at their stupid chili cook-off because she doesn't like Moms for Liberty, what isn't appropriate for my child. I, as the parent, make that decision, not you, not the rest of the a-holes with casseroles group of book burners. You and the rest of the minivan Taliban are religious extremists whose view of sexuality and offensive includes books like And Tango Makes Three. This is a book about 2 male penguins raising their own chick. I'm not sure how male penguins actually can drop eggs, but anyway, this is the book. Feminist Baby and My Shadow is Purple. Because she's not being honest. It's not, or has it ever been, about porn or sexually explicit material, because kids literally have access to that on their cell phones. And I will make an aside, not if you're a good parent. It's an attempt by far-right religious extremists to remove any books that cover queer existence or discuss systemic racism from access to anyone's kids, not just their own. Then she goes on, I'm a disabled veteran. I serve this country and our Constitution because of the promise of freedom for everyone. Now think of her argument, right? Okay, for everyone. I saw what religious extremists did in Afghanistan. Now we're going to conflate America with Afghanistan, a country that was well on its way to westernization before religious fundamentalists took power. Well, at least we agree on that. The BS that this woman and the rest of the Planned Karenhood brigade promote is antithetical to the freedom I fought for. There's a reason they are labeled extremists. This woman is free to be a Christian and live her life and raise her kids how she wishes. She's free to have her beliefs and values, but what she does not get to do is try to indoctrinate my children with her values or remove books that she disagrees with, because that is my choice, not hers. Moms for bigotry, making decisions for me and everyone else, is not freedom. I don't co-parent with Christian nationalists. As an actual patriot and American who knows and respects what freedom really is, I will not let these hateful people win.
The first thing I would say about all that, I'm sorry, Michael, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, she's so good at name calling and bullying, but go ahead.
Well, the first thing you need to remember is that the number one rule in a Marxist fight is to blame your opponent for what you are doing. They're disregarding, they're taking out Harper Lee's book, To Kill a Mockingbird. Mm-hmm. They don't want kids to have Bibles in schools. They will jail a teacher if she's got a Bible in the school. What they are doing, they're hiding behind calling us names for doing what they want to do, so that the attention is on us. We're the bad guy while they're doing what they're doing. So they're removing books, perfectly good books for kids to read, while we're objecting to the obscenities and propaganda that they're putting in schools, like Ibrahim Kendi and all of this porn that they're calling cultural studies, all of this Heather Has Two Mommies and things like that. They're trying to indoctrinate our kids with those books so that their thinking will be warped and that they will go along with whatever they're told by our new obscene elites. While behind the scenes, while they're screaming all of this at us, they're removing the books our children should be reading. Right. So that's what they're doing. I find this hilarious, but the problem is, even though Ryan Walters has gotten these rules passed and he is actually trying to enforce in the school system, they've gone underground. In the school district where I live, it was obvious on their website what they were doing. The sex clubs in our middle schools, and high schools, the indoctrination of our kids, all of this, that you could find it on the website, a lot of it, for the school. But ever since Ryan Walters got these rules passed, they've gone underground. You can't, they've totally revamped their websites. You can't find it obvious anymore. You have to go into the schools. And there's, I have a teacher friend in Putnam City School District who has been slipping me copies of emails from their principal wanting the teachers in the school to continue to promote all of this LGBT, CRT, all of these SEL programs on our kids, but they're doing it under the radar now and only through internal emails. And I imagine they'll have to give that up somehow eventually, because hopefully we could get those in a FOIA request, but it's not for certain. And they charge so much now to get information from them. If you ask for copies of documents from the schools now, it can cost you thousands of dollars just to get them, because of the way they will categorize them so they can charge you more for their so-called research, when all they would have to do
I think it's important for me to jut in right now too and say, you ran for school board in Putnam City.
Yes, I did.
And for this type of reason, right?
Well, when I came back from Belarus, after realizing that America had gone so far down the road to communism that I didn't even realize, I got back in 2007 and I started telling people, do you not see this? This is what's going on. This is communist. This is how the dictator in Belarus does it. You don't want this here. People laughed at me. Yes. And until, yes. Well, in I think 2014, 2013, I think it was 2014, I was just sitting in a laundromat minding my own business, reading a book. And a man came up and asked me if I would teach his son to read, because he was about to fail second grade because he couldn't read. So I said, let me pray about it, and I'll get back with you. And when I went back to him a couple of weeks later, I said, I will teach your son to read if he and the mother were not together, and the mother had a husband. So I said, if all of the adults in this boy's life will agree to let me teach him using the Bible, then I'll teach him to read. And they agreed. And that's when I started getting into what the schools were doing and not doing. And I got the kid reading again. And so we went to enroll him. I went with the father to enroll him in third grade. And the teacher said that if the boy was not fully capable of learning new words on his own and teaching himself as he goes to improve his own reading, which he wasn't at the time, she said that you don't need to put him in school right now. You need to homeschool him, because she said that they were teaching Common Core, and that she was going to be his math teacher and his homeroom teacher. And she said that the way we have to teach math is backwards. And so the teachers and I, over the summer, the other teachers, other math teachers, they had gotten together trying to figure out how to teach this Common Core math, because it was backwards and the kids had to show their work. And she said, we as teachers cannot figure out how to do this and make it comfortable and easily to memorize and learn how to do this. She said, so we have no idea how we're going to teach the kids. So if he is not ready to really work hard and fight against nature, pretty much, to learn how to do this and deal with all of the his still in progress gaining reading understanding, then he won't be successful. So you need to keep him out of school. So we took him to a lady who was homeschooling her own children, and she homeschooled this boy with her kids. Wow. So because I work full time, I couldn't do that. So that's how it went. And he stayed out of school until he reached 15, and his father put him back in high school. Now the kid's just bored to death and doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So there's really, I know you were talking about Common Core. Common Core never went away. They just renamed it.
Oh, no.
And they've tweaked it now for CRT. So now it's all about how many white people oppressed, how many black people, and what was the outcome and the number of whoever was left on the bus or something like that. But they're using all of this CRT lingo and the LGBT verbiage to confuse and frustrate and indoctrinate our children in every class they take. So anyway, when I learned all of this, I decided I couldn't know this and not do anything, because how am I going to explain that to God? When I'm standing before God after this life, I don't want to say I knew it and didn't do anything about it. So I decided to run for school board. And the matter of fact, one of the things that I did, and I know this is hearsay because I was in a meeting that most people weren't. Matter of fact, I don't think anybody was there but the NEA and the school board and me. And I was sitting listening to what the school board were discussing before the meeting started. And the lady that I was running against said, was laughing to the guy next to her on the school board panel. She's a school board member. And she turned to this man and she says, laughing, she said, parents really think they can tell us what to do with their kids. And at that moment, I decided I'm running against that woman because I knew she was in my district. So what we're dealing with in schools is not a happy accident for the progressives. This has been a plan from the early 1900s to get to where they are now. And now that they are in control, they do not have to hide what they're doing. No. This country could flip to a communist dictatorship overnight whenever our government chooses to do it. That's how far down the road we are.
Yep. So
we have to stand up, speak the truth, do not back down, and do not go along with them, even if you're going to get called a name. And, you know, I love people and I love Americans, and I know I call them cowards out of my own frustration, but a lot of them just have absolutely no idea who they're up against. and what the tactics are. So
yeah, but again, I mean, I'm going to blame this thing. I'm going to continue to blame this thing, and I'm going to continue to blame the fact that we have so little self-control. I mean, just as people, and I think when you really think on that response that I read from Facebook, that woman, there's no self-control in that. I mean, you just think about the name calling that she uses, the anger that she uses, and her last line is, "I will not let these hateful people win."
And that's why they call them useful idiots.
Yes. And that's the sad thing. But and this is what I'm so glad you came on, because we need to make the point, when you don't educate a child, and it's clear that they're not educating kids anymore.
Right.
I mean, yeah, some kids are being educated, but it's mainly because they're getting it at home, or they're already, their parents are pretty well educated and they're just leeching it off of their parents. It's not coming from schools anymore.
No.
I mean, we're just not, I mean, a lot of private schools even have gone the CRT direction. They're not, producing the education that they should be. And that's, I think, the other reason why I hate these tax credits for private school, because I know they know by getting all of these kids into a private school that as soon as those private schools decide to flip that switch, then those kids are stuck there too. I mean, the whole bottom line, and I think these people are basically useful idiots. I mean, I look at groups like OCPA, and I think either they're specifically destructive, they want these things to happen, or they're useful idiots. But I mean, they're not helping either way. I mean, when they're doing what they're doing, and it is, when you don't educate a populace, then what they will respond to is propaganda. And when you think back on what I read, that woman has been propagandized to the hilt. I mean, I think you would say, Lori, that this is something that you would hear in Belarus. You would hear Belarusians say about Americans or people in the West, for example. And so for a fact that this person has just been propagandized. I don't know what her intellect is. I can't measure that, but I can tell you that's nothing but the result of propaganda.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, Marxists use emotions against us. And that's the reason, well, it's been at least a decade ago, where have you noticed people stopped saying, I think this, I think that. Now it's all, I feel this, I feel that. Yeah. Even when they're talking about their brain function, they're saying, I feel, because under Marxism, you are not supposed to think. They only want you emoting so that they can control you, because they can control you by your emotions, and they propagandize by emotion. So you're not going to hear people talking about what they think anymore. It's all about feeling.
Well, so give me, because we're kind of winding down here. We're at 59 minutes. So if you have so much information, Lori, and I'm hoping that people will watch this and really listen to what you've had to say and think about your perspective. But as we get out of here, I want you, what do you think? Have you lost all hope? I mean, do we just throw up our hands and go,
Oh, no.
I mean, what do you suggest that we do to try to push back against this?
Well, this is a question I've been thinking a lot about, because even though I wasn't elected back on April 4th, so I'm trying to fight from the outside, but they've gone underground. It's really hard to fight something you can't see. But the one thing that can work, the one thing we all have to do, pick a front, and my front is the schools. I will fight on that front, and fight as hard as you can fight, and pray, because it's not up to us. God is allowing this for a reason, and our obligation to him is to stand up for the innocent and to speak the truth. So, and the one thing that Marxism cannot fight, cannot defend itself against, is the truth. So when you see them doing something and they're calling it something else, name it for what it is. Say it out loud. Don't stop saying it. and don't back down. It doesn't matter who calls you a name. It doesn't really matter if you have to go to jail for it or if they shoot you in the head. It doesn't matter. If we're going to win this, we have to stand up for the truth, and it's worth every life it will cost. We have to stand up. We don't know how crazy these people are going to get, but historically, under Marxism, lying, cheating, stealing, and murder are all just tools of the trade. None of that is any worse than any of the others. They will use it all, and it doesn't matter. The truth needs to be responded to. It needs to be proclaimed and lived. And if we don't back down from this, we will win. What God's plan is for this, only He's knowing, and He only wrote part of it in the Word, so we can know what we suspect is going on. But the only tool that we've got that can really harm Marxism is the truth. And if we don't speak it loudly and forever and not back down, then there is no hope. So we need every parent, every student, every citizen in this country to hold on to what is true. Don't back down to any of the agendas that they're pushing out there and saying you're a meanie if you go against this. Just be a meanie, because we have to stand with the truth.
Well, God bless you for Lori for that. I mean, because Michael and I agree with that, 100%. I mean, sorry, Michael, that I'm putting words in your mouth, but
you're going to be a meanie, Michael. That's okay. We have to stand for the truth regardless of what it takes, regardless of what it costs us.
Yeah. Well, and you've lost a job, actually. I mean, because you've lost a job for.
I actually said that Leah Thomas is a man. And I said that if a judge does not know what a woman is, that judge is not competent to judge a Title IX case. And I lost my job with MidFirst Bank for saying that.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, thank you for being strong, Lori. Thank you so much. And thank you for being on. I enjoyed this conversation so much. Just to listen to somebody, who can say, hey, I've, been there, done that kind of a thing. I think that's what people need. I mean, I really do.
Well, there's a lot more to the story about not just the comparison between the U.S. and Belarus, but to how we can fight and win these battles. We're not guaranteed to win all of them, but I do believe that we could win most of them. But like I said, this is all about God and His plan. And we'll find out what He is planning to do and how He will use each of us. But the bottom line for winning any war against Marxism is to speak the truth, call out what they're doing, and speak for what it is. Don't be wishy-washy. Don't try to be clever or diplomatic. Just speak the truth as it is, so that hopefully the shock will get through to some of these people who are now acting as useful idiots, because the useful idiots are usually the first ones the Marxists will kill when they take over.
Yeah.
Well, and for those of you who might be watching this who don't understand, we're not calling names when we say useful idiots. That Karl Marx used that term himself to describe the people that they were propagandizing into pushing in communism. So we're not calling names. I mean, we're using the terms that Karl Marx used himself. So
if I could just throw one little comment in there. Well, you know what Mark Zuckerberg calls his users? Remember from the good old days? Dumb effers. He actually called his users dumb effers. Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
It's not a happy name, but that's their function in our current culture.
Well, and that's what propagandized people, like you said, if we just teach them by rote, which is what you said they do in Belarus, right? They just teach them by
Yes.
rote. You're supposed to memorize this stuff, and then you're supposed to spew it out, and
Yes.
then you're supposed to move on down the road. So if you don't bring up any critical thinking, and you only teach one side of any argument, and then you just tell people that they have to just regurgitate or vomit up whatever they're told, that's how you get propaganda. That's exactly how propaganda is formed, because the only way you avoid propaganda is by using your noggin, the brain that God gave you, and the intellect that he put in there, to take one idea and compare it against another idea, and read to find out what history says, and all, and build a belief system. But we're not building a belief system, we're propagandizing. And I think if you said anything that I'm hoping will really sink into people, then that's what it is.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Lori, it's been so great to have you on, and thank you so much for being on with us, and stay in touch, because if you find out other things, we're always happy to bring them to light if we can. So please stay in touch with us.
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care, Lori, and you have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
All righty.
Lori, bye.
Bye-bye. Oh my gosh. Michael, that was probably one of the best interviews I think we've ever done.
Yeah. Well,
don't you?
Oh yeah. I mean, it comes down to Lori is the epitome of experiencing communism, Marxism firsthand. Not just in like, okay, we all experienced that with COVID. Okay.
Yeah.
The government,
yes,
declared their emergency. They controlled the masses. It was all greater good. You have to do it for your neighbor. You have to personally sacrifice for everybody else. Well, Lori lived that for 3 years. So they rolled out, just a small little sample, a test, in my opinion, a little test sample here, for COVID. But all in all, I mean, Lori is, she needs to have a huge stage. She needs to be speaking at every one of these events and conferences everywhere, because people, there's just such a small little handful of people like Lori with that experience who left, who was here and saw that, felt the country. Oh, we're free. We're the United States. We have liberty. We're all this. And then she leaves, comes back, and the blinders are now off, and she sees exactly how Marxist, how communist, how controlling, how tyrannical the government really is. The United States really turned. So, she was right. She hit it nail on the head when she said, we're all we're the frog in the boiling pot. People just really have no idea. And I mean, she's the best. I'm so glad you got her on. And I mean,
I'm so glad she came on, because that's the other thing. And I really want to make this point, and I should have done it while she was literally on with us. That woman has guts.
Yeah,
I mean, she lost a dang job for just saying, no, a boy can't be a girl. I'm really sorry. A girl is a girl and a boy is a boy. Yeah.
And shame on MidFirst.
Oh gosh, that's just horrible. And of course, if this gets out to somebody who's a MidFirst employee or whatever, and they'll say, oh, we didn't fire her for that, it was for this. And because everybody will go, oh, but they're a big bank, and, I have my money there, and there can't be anything wrong with them. There must be something wrong with her. And that's, it's kind of like what we talk about all the time about why dark money works, right?
Yeah. People
are programmed to think the worst things about people and the best things about the system.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what I was going to make this point while we were talking to Lori, but Jenny, I think the biggest separating factor between people like Rope, people like you that have been in this for a long time. Well, and me, yes. I mean,
don't make it about me.
I'm a short term. I'm like one of the only little frogs that jumped out of the pot, a couple years ago. Yeah. But a huge separating factor is we don't get paid. There's no money coming in to influence, like OCPA, like all these other groups, all these, freedom people, all these liberty people, they're all getting paid in one way or another to push an agenda. If they're not doing it for no pay, if they're doing it out of, like we are, like the goodness of our hearts, for fighting for freedom and liberty and the future for our kids, then, they're bought and paid for.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can totally make that argument. But here's something, it's interesting that you say that, though, because I'm doing another piece on dark money. It's all up on my screen right now. I'm doing another piece. Hopefully it'll be done today, so watch for that. But on this piece for dark money that I'm doing right now, I can't help but think, I mean, because we've got another PAC involved, and I can't help but think that I've heard people, like Carol Hefner at one point was saying, well, we're going to start this new PAC, and, we're going to get, because we're going to have to get into this, and we're going to have to push back, and two wrongs don't make a right. And it's just shocking to me that I think that we're kind of trained to think like that. Well, these bad people are doing these PACs and it's got dark money in it, so we just need to turn around and do the same thing, and that will somehow offset it. I don't understand the thought process here. I mean, two wrongs are never going to make a right, because then all that does is move the Overton window in that direction again, right? I mean, so here's right and here's wrong. So as soon as the closer that you get to these, right? And then they start, so who's right and who's wrong? That's why they made the phrase, two wrongs don't make a right, because all it does is make you go this direction.
Well, it's just like the retaliation issue with like my kids. Okay, I got 5 kids. I take my 2 youngest, my 9-year-old, my 12-year-old. They'll be like this. He said, she said, he said, she said, he said. I mean, for 20 minutes, until I'm like, do you not realize, what you're doing here? It's just like, just stop. You're 12 years old. Just stop. Leave your 9-year-old brother alone. But that's the whole thing is, you're not any better using the exact same tools. Doing what they're doing. Trying to fight them with their own tools is turning into them.
No, we've got to fight them by doing the right thing.
Yeah.
That's the only way we move everything back the other direction, is to fight them by doing the right thing. But as soon as we start fighting them doing what they're doing, we become them. There's no way to get around. You simply can't get around that argument. I don't know of one time. I mean, maybe somebody in the comments will go, oh, well, I remember this time. And that's maybe so. But I don't see one time where it's ever gotten any better by doing the exact same thing that the people that are doing the wrong thing, we're going to do that to kind of fight them. I mean, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Well,
and if we can't start fighting people by like what Lori said, and she's the one that's the authority. She's been there, done that, and lost her job standing up. Well, the rest of us are just going, well, but I don't, well, but and we all sound like Porky Pig.
Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but ultimately we're going to have to experience a lot bigger, catalyzing event, whether it's some type of, major lockdown, major tyranny, major, emergency situation, whatever it is, to really, because the people like us, we're always going to be on board to fight this, and people like Riley. But until the masses really get their head, jarred a little bit, I mean, I honestly, I think it's going to take some major massive event or, something to really wake people up.
Well, and the crazy thing is, I think right now there's a lot of that going on. You think of, I mean, I'm over budget in my grocery budget this month. I mean, I probably $200. I mean, I'm way over on my grocery budget, and I'm not over on my grocery budget. Well, I don't know. I probably didn't do very well on my budget in general this month. So that is probably my fault. But on the other hand, I mean, when you're talking about milk that's $6.50 for a gallon and a loaf of bread that's $5, and I mean,
Well,
these
all
people
that's
don't see
coming.
cause and effect.
Yeah.
They just don't see cause and effect.
Well, we need to do that whole show on the banking system and money and debt.
Yeah, we do.
Because people really have no idea the amount of, and it was kind of funny. I was going to make this comment, during the podcast with Lori, when you were talking about redistribution of wealth. Well, I mean, I would go a step farther, because the wealth isn't even really there. People are so strapped in the first place. There's not that much wealth to really go around. It's all the creation of debt. They're literally just creating debt on top of debt, on top of debt. And then that debt ultimately, like always, is control. They're creating money out of nowhere. They're creating all these programs. They're borrowing money from the federal government, with the idea, oh, we'll pay it back someday. So that debt is control. So, they're calling it, hey, we'll give you a tax credit or this or that, but they're actually just taking on more debt to enslave us even further. Jenny might be frozen. Well, I think she is. We'll just end there, because I don't know if she's going to get back on here. But this Friday, we've got the V1 SUT blogger and just absolute hero, in my opinion, for exposing multiple stories, from the Bartlesville transgender incident to the Western Heights transgender principal and the other ones there. Oh, there's Jenny. She's back on.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, anyway,
I've asked them. I'm working on it with StreamYard. Yeah. I don't know what's going on.
Well, I was just saying, if you didn't hear that, we've got V1 SUT coming on. Yeah. We're going to talk about transgender stuff, and so.
Yeah. Also, while we're thinking about it, let's just put this on the schedule, so people who are watching will know. Why don't we try on the 11th, because Janelle's going to be with us on the 6th to talk about books. Why don't we on the 11th do the banking system? Do you want to do that?
Yeah, I'll have to but I'll get something ready for that.
Yeah, because if you do that, you got a couple of weeks to kind of get it ready, and we'll do a thing on the banking system.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think some people say, well, you're an education group, what do you care about all of this? Well, I think, and I don't know, jump in here, since you apparently didn't when we were on with Lori. You know me, you got to just knock me down and talk. People have got to understand the whole picture, because our educations aren't just what we learn in school. Our educations are what we allow ourselves to be taught by the world and by books and everything else. And, knowing what's happening with the banking system is huge. I mean, it affects how you do everything, including educating your own children, because as you well know, we advocate for you, to do that. So definitely we'll have on the 11th, and we'll have, we'll talk that out.
I'll expand on that, because in my opinion, Jenny, this all goes back to education. If we knew if we were taught our actual constitutional rights, our liberties, the Bill of Rights, if the Bill of Rights were pounded into these kids from day one when they went to school, we wouldn't be in any of these situations, because people would know. If the Constitution and civics and things like that are true history, were actually taught with importance, reading, math, and our true history of what our God-given rights are, we would not be in this situation. We'd be the absolute pinnacle of a country and the leader. We would be the true leaders of the free world, but not we're going in the other direction on purpose, because our entire education system has been taken over by these communist, Marxist, crazy liberals for the last 50, 60 years. And they've gotten, now Lori was right, they've gotten to the point to where they're so powerful, they can just come out in the open with all the transgender everything and all the SEL and CRT, and they don't have to hide that stuff anymore. So I would say it all comes down to education. All goes into what is going into these minds of these little kids, you know, from K through 12.
So I heard you say, I'm going to share my screen again, because I know we need to get off of here, but let me just do this really fast. I'm going to share my screen again really quickly. This was the article that V1SUT posted today, silencing Oklahoma's drag queen reveals. Hold on a second. I've got to put up this the actual here it is right here. Oklahoma's drag queen district reveals why chronically failing schools cannot improve. She put this out today, and this is on Sean Mernan's Facebook page. This is the drag queen principal right here.
Wow.
Okay. Now I want to make a point. And she talks about in here about how this is to what you were saying a second ago about they're so powerful now that they just tell you to go take a flying leap, because they had a school board meeting, and inside the school board meeting, the only one person who stood up to say anything during the meeting about what was going on was treated like crap by the rest of the people that were in this meeting, that were drag queens, that were people that were all in that drag queen lifestyle, many of them who have been hired by this district. So it's kind of like a groomer district. I mean, at this point, you could just call the whole district a groomer district. And here's the thing. We used to have, years ago, and it's still in law. You could be fired for something called moral turpitude. Moral turpitude is a word that describes an unnatural behavior that you would not expect somebody in a civilized setting to use. But see, the problem is we've changed what civilized means.
Yeah.
See, we've gone from civilized being, when I was a kid, I wore gloves, little white gloves to church with and we went to church and we went every Sunday. That was where we were 50 some years ago. Now we're to the point where you can go sit in a courtroom, just like I did several months ago, and you can hear a judge say, well, I need you to swear to that. And the guy says, I don't believe in God. I'm not swearing to anything. And the judge just shrugs and goes, oh, okay. And now we've got drag queens as principals, and people saying, well, I don't care what they do on their day off. Well, I'm sorry, but back even a short term ago, maybe even a decade ago, that would be under the category of moral turpitude, and you could be fired for that, because the thought process was, if you're doing something that's uncivilized, even on your time off, you're not civilized enough to be in this job or that job, and certainly not a job with children. But what do we care anymore? Right.
Well, and we live, so we live in that culture. We're in a culture war, period.
Yeah.
And that moral system, comes from the Christian, Judeo, religious teachings. I mean, that's where the moral system that made this country, that put this world into civilization that actually could function and get to this point of technology and abundance and everything, it came out of a moral system based in, in religion or Christianity in one way or another, at least in this country. So, everything that's amoral, is going against that, God-based moral system. So, it's so funny when you talk freedom, like these people, they want just total freedom. Well, that's more anarchy. I mean, there still needs to be a moral code and a system of governance, self-governance to, a moral set of rules that, we all agree on. Just because you want to be an anarchist and wear transgender outfits into school or do whatever, doesn't mean that is the right thing to do.
Well, it's kind of like, I mean, I don't co-parent with Christian nationalists. Remember that from the comment that I read earlier. So that's a trend. This is the new propaganda term, is Christian nationalists. And so anybody who is a Christian is somehow a Christian nationalist. And that's not necessarily, the truth by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not even sure what they mean by Christian, the term Christian nationalist. I guess somebody who believes that the country was founded on a Judeo-Christian, foundation. Maybe that's what a Christian nationalist is. But if you make it a pejorative, that term, and you demonize, you put somebody in a group and you give them a name, they're so easy to demonize that way, right? I mean, isn't that what Hitler did with the Jews?
Yeah. Well, and kind of, and I know it's already an hour, almost an hour and a half, but
I know.
And we, this is kind of stuff we need to say for just, our talks on Fridays later on. But ultimately, people have just completely obfuscated the truth.
Okay. Yes.
The truth does not exist. Now what exists is their own reality. I've told you that one term, solipsism. Solipsism is where you define your truth by how you feel or what you perceive, not what the actual truth is. That's what the real problem we're in is. The real truth is completely whitewashed, and everything is just your own perception of what is going on. It's your own thought process, your feelings. That's not the actual truth. We need to get back to right and wrong, truth, and things like that.
Yeah. All we can do, honestly, is pray. And that makes us a target too, because we'll pray, but I definitely, I believe in it. Believe in it. Seen it work for me. All right, Michael. So you said that we're having our V1SUT author on Friday. Yep. And then next week we're having Janelle on. And then also next week, I'm thinking on the 4th, you and I talking more about the tax credit situation, because the rules have come out and we have until the 12th of October to be able to comment on them. And I am kind of in the process of, I'm going through some back channels to reach out to some legislators, and I'll go through some forward channels as well to see if they want to comment about this, because the way these rules are written, I don't know how you make the argument that they're for any low income family. I mean, I really don't see how you can make that comment. And or even, I mean, just by reading the rules. So I think we need to talk about them, and hopefully people will, read them as well. And I think I've posted the link on our Facebook pages, and you can always, email us for the link if you'd like it as well to read them. But so anything else for today?
No, that's it. I need to look at that link that Riley sent. I can't pull that up on my side.
Hold on a second. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I can't pull it up either. And I can't copy it either. So we'll look at it and see. We might be able to hit it right at 1 minute and 30 or 1 hour and 30 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I was a couple minutes late. So if you want to go over 2 more minutes, you can.
Well, people have probably already had it for today. So we'll just call it a day, and we'll revisit everything on Friday. So, oh, I did forget to pull up our normal video file, didn't I? So hang on one second. Let me do that. Maybe. There they are. Okay. Hold on one second. All right. We'll pull up our video here. All right, Michael, it's great to see you. And
Yes,
thank you
ma'am.
for tuning in, everybody. And we'll see you again on Friday. So thanks for being with us.